gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
Welcome to India TV, I'm Ashwini Vedakan. For the past 2 weeks, Sri Lanka has witnessed a united uprising of its citizens as the people relentlessly gathered to the streets demanding justice, answers and new leadership. But what is next for the island nation, and how can the law be navigated for the betterment of the country? This week's special features the president of the Bar Association Saliya Pieris, who will help us shed some light to Sri Lanka's legal plight. Welcome to the show, Saliya. It's good to have you here with us.
Thank you.
How do you view the protests and the people's call for a fresh start?
So people have a right to express themselves, and people have a right to disagree and to dissent. And this is a right which must be respected and also understood. I think it is very necessary that the people's concerns, the people are demonstrating their anger, their anguish by protesting. And I think there has to be, on the part of the authorities, there has to be empathy and understanding of the anguish and the plight. And there has to be respect for people's opinion. And that opinion might sometimes, for authorities, it might be unpleasant. It might be, some people might even find it distasteful, but still you have to express, you have to accept the right of people to disagree and to dissent, and sometimes maybe disagree loudly too. But of course, at the same time, we must say that the protest cannot be violent. It would not be right for protests to be protesters to harm property of the state or of individuals. And of course, that will actually, if the Bar Association has issued a statement on this, we believe that violent protests will actually defeat the objective sought to be achieved by a protest. And those who are participating in protests must also be concerned, must be wary about those within them who might try to cause violence or try to cause harm to people, property, both public and private property. So the right to protest must be respected, but at the same time, there must be it must be within the four corners of the law.
The importance of protesting peacefully, but can we expect that given the extreme hardships of the people and their outpouring of anger?
Yes, of course, but well, even despite there being hardship, despite there being anger, the law requires that protests be peaceful. The law does not allow for violent protests and for people to harm property. One might understand the emotions of people who are suffering. One might understand that people who find it hard to feed their families, to earn sufficiently to look after their families. One can understand their anger, and one might even feel they're justified. But what we do have to realize is the way forward has to be peaceful, because if not, the very objectives that people seek to be achieved will not be achieved by protests turning out to be violent. So that is the bottom line. That cannot be compromised.
What are the possible scenarios in view of the Constitution to meet the people's present demands?
Well, I think whatever solution which has to be achieved has to be through the constitutional provisions. So it is very clear the Constitution sets out details about how a government is established, how ministers are appointed, how a country is run. There is a framework of the Constitution. If you want to go outside that, one has to amend the Constitution. And I think for any country, it is important to adhere to the basic rules, basic principles of the Constitution. And for that, it is very important for everyone to understand that whatever solution that is being offered has to be within the framework, within the four corners of the Constitution. Of course, in order to achieve that, there might have to be compromises made, but there are also those in authority will have to understand that that if that that the consequences of not having change when people want change and when people are requesting seeking that those in power be sensitive to their to their views, to their needs, then I think it is a paramount duty of those in authority to respond. So the directive principles of state policy of the Constitution reflect these. So the directive principles set out a number of areas where those in government, the president, the parliament, the cabinet of ministers are bound to achieve. And so those are set out, and those are some of those are things what the people are at present demanding.
How far can people power go?
Well, I think ultimately people's power in any country, the people are the ultimate authority. And so we have seen in every country how people's power works. So it may be in democracies, in dictatorships, everywhere people's power works. And in our constitution, the sovereignty of the sovereignty is in the people. So the people's, but of course, one must also understand that when we talk of people's power, that power must be exercised in an intelligent manner. It must be exercised rationally and not rashly.
And on that note, we'll be going in for a short break.
You love the feeling of being renewed. To stay beautiful every single day. To breathe just like we do, because you are truly delicate, protecting the ones who've been with us through the years. With Sayalac Care, the only wood coating that truly protects you. Sayalac Wood Coatings from JAT.
Welcome back as we continue our conversation with the President of the Bar Association, Saliya Pieris. What is the quickest and most practical way out of the current situation in terms of government, caretaker cabinet and a call for an election?
I don't think at this stage I am competent to answer that question. That is something which those in power, those in the opposition have to get together and decide as to what the quickest way is. So I do not think it is within my scope to answer that question. But most certainly, one must look at the needs of the country. The country at the moment, there is economic instability as well as political instability. Both, it is a vicious cycle. Further political instability will lead to further economic instability and vice versa. So those who are in power, those in the opposition, those who are politicians must realize that this is the time for them to be statesmen, not politicians, but to be statesmen and take decisions. And for that, one might, as in any conflict resolution, there will have to be a policy of give and take, and that is very necessary. But what all of us would have to realize is that the country is facing a very grave situation, both in economic terms and in political terms. And the sooner this is resolved in a way that is accepted by the people, the better it is for the entirety of our country.
Now, the opposition leader has said he wants the 20th Amendment replaced by 19A, which would mean a transfer of executive power from the President to the Parliament. But that may not satisfy the people's demands for a fresh start. Could you comment on this?
I can comment on the 19th Amendment. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka, at the time the 19th Amendment was enacted, the Bar Association supported the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. In the operation of the 19th Amendment, we did see there were some weaknesses, but it had its very good points. I think the most importantly, the 19th Amendment controlled the powers of the executive. And when the 20th Amendment was passed, the Bar Association, in fact, pointed out that the importance of retaining institutions such as a constitutional council, so that the president's powers of appointment are not arbitrary. The Bar Association pointed out the importance of maintaining the independence of commissions, such as the Human Rights Commission and the Bribery Commission. And the Bar Association took up the position that in appointing the persons to these officers, that there must be a process where the president doesn't have an absolute say, but that it is done in terms of that there is a sifting process, and basically that the Constitution Council should review the president's nominations in those respects. For the judiciary too, that was our view that that judicial appointments too should be have the approval of the Constitutional Council. So where the 20th Amendment is concerned, I think those were some of the key drawbacks of the 20th Amendment. I think in any system of governance, too much power in one organ of the state, whether it be the executive, legislature, judiciary, I think could lead to bad results. So I think there must be a checks and balances. And within the executive also, I think it's important that the one of the problems of the executive presidency is that it concentrates too much power in one individual. And I think that is something which has to change. And it is important that any executive be accountable to Parliament, and that must be ensured. So that is how I see. Of course, as your question as to whether that would be enough, whether people would find that acceptable enough, that only time will tell.
And what would your personal thoughts be towards the current situation of Sri Lanka?
Well, I think what I would like to say is I think that we need to understand, on one hand, we need to understand that the rights of the people of everyone who is protesting. There may be a number of people who do not join the protest, but who are suffering as a result of the economic crisis. We must also understand that the country is at crossroads, and the path we choose will decide on the consequences for this country for a generation. And I think that we must be all very mindful. I do have criticism of some sectors that they have at times they have thought to remain silent, or they have not been vocal enough. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka, by January, we issued a statement on the current economic crisis. We set out in detail what we perceive were the problems of the economic crisis and what ought to be done. But I'm sorry to say that not every sector had been so vocal. And it is only now you find that some of the sectors are expressing their views when it should have been done months ago. Had they made their views known months ago, I think the government also would have been alerted earlier to the crisis situation. And this is why I think it is very important as citizens that we remain vigilant about our rights. And I think for any government, the vigilance of people is absolutely important. For any government to govern successfully, I think criticism and dissent is necessary. And this is not very often people, when people are in power, they fail to realize that. They always like to hear only the good things about them. But I think one lesson is, for when you are in power, you must also be open to criticism, be sensitive to criticism, and respond to criticism. So the message I would like to say is that this country is at crossroads. We need to be, what we do in the next 2 to 3 weeks, what our government, the people who we have elected into Parliament, what they do will have a bearing for a generation to come. And so it can be positive, but if it is negative, the country slides down. And that is why I think everyone, all of us will have to act extremely responsibly, but at the same time, I think we need to assert ourselves, assert our rights, our fundamental rights as people of this country.
Our final question for this evening, Saliya. How did the magnanimous gesture on the part of the legal community to protect the protesters come about?
Well, I think it was very spontaneous. The when there were when it was understood that protesters had been arrested, members of the bar, young members of the bar, senior members of the bar, offered to help. And from morning we found that they visited those who had been arrested at the police station. Then they also there were people with injuries, people who had been obviously who had been assaulted. So then they coordinated also with the Human Rights Commission. And I must say the Human Rights Commission also played a very important role in this. And finally, lawyers did appear for these protests for people who had been what we think were unfairly arrested, and of course who were subjected to torture or severe assault. And that is how the bar appeared. But I think behind this is that the bar is always committed to safeguarding the interests of people. Sometimes the legal profession is not looked at kindly by everyone, and the people. It is only really at a time like this that the society also can value the legal profession. The legal profession as a whole stands up for the rule of law, for the independence of the judiciary, and to safeguard the fundamental rights of the people of this country. So that is one aspect. Of course, as the Bar Association also, we have intervened on several occasions. One such was the recent intervention in the Supreme Court, where we have filed a fundamental rights action in respect of the current situation. And last week, the leave to proceed was granted by the Supreme Court. So these are some of the ways in which the bar appears and the bar understands its role in the society and at this crucial time.
Well, this has definitely been an eye-opener, and I think we've all gained a better understanding of today's situation. Thank you for your time this evening, Saliya.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we have the latest from the island's economy. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and here's the latest from the island's economy. Economic perceptions in business circles point to a hard landing at the very best. A massive majority of 85% of poll respondents now expect the national economy to worsen further, which is 9 percentage points higher than in the previous month of February. As for survey participants who express optimism, a mere 3% of 7% in February say the economy will improve in the coming 12 months, while 12% from 17% in the preceding month believe it will stay the same during this time. As for whatever is left of business prospects, expectations continue to be muted, with roughly 2/3 of respondents expecting their sales volumes to get better in the 12 months ahead, which is by and large a repeat of the survey findings in the last 2 months. This compares unfavorably with what corporate executives said in December, when 86% of business people who spoke to the pollsters said their sales volumes will improve. As in February, however, there's good news in the latest report on how businesses have performed since this time last year. This takes the form of an increase from 5 in 10 at 51% to around 2/3 at 65% of the sample population, revealing that their sales volumes have increased compared to a year ago. Likewise, the short term also sees an uptick by 12 percentage points to 58% in the outlook for the next 3 months. Yes, despite the state of play as it were. There's more bad news on the investment front, as in the count of business people who deem it to be poor or very poor, with last month's eye-opening majority of 88% blowing up to 92%. And whereas 12% of the survey sample perceived the investment climate as being good or fair in February, the count a month later has plummeted to single digits of 8%. Thankfully, a healthy 94% of poll respondents versus 9 in 10 last month say their businesses will maintain existing staff numbers, while only 5% expect to shed human resources in the coming 6 months. But the share of corporates planning to increase their staff numbers over the next 6 months has fallen to just 1% from 5% in February. And that's all the time we have for you this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.